My wife cheated with our neighbor, then forged my signature to sell our family home for $500, $0. Now she's draining the proceeds, and I just found out she's been lying about our bank accounts the entire time. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, trying to piece together how my life fell apart in what feels like a matter of days. The wild part, it all started with a stupid gut feeling that I shoved aside. I mean, I wasn't blind, but I never really thought my wife, Emily, would actually cheat on me. We'd been together for over 10 years, married for 8, and I'd always believed we had a pretty solid foundation. Or at least that's what I told myself. Everything seemed normal until I started noticing little things. She'd come home later than usual, claiming she was working late or meeting up with friends, but her phone started acting weird. She'd hide it when I entered the room, and sometimes I'd catch her deleting messages or clearing her browser history. At first, I thought I was paranoid. Maybe she was just stressed, or maybe I was overthinking it because of work pressures I was under. But then I found the receipts, small ones mostly from a coffee shop she'd never mentioned. I brushed it off, but then I saw the charges for a hotel downtown, one she definitely hadn't told me about. One night I decided to check her phone when she was in the shower. I know trust issues, right? But I couldn't shake the feeling. And what I found hit me like a freight train. There were texts, flirty, suggestive, and downright disgusting messages. She was seeing someone else, a neighbor named Jake who lives just a few doors down. The messages weren't just friendly, they were explicit. She'd been sneaking around for months, lying about where she was, who she was with. It was like I didn't even know her anymore. I was stunned. I felt betrayed, angry, hurt, like someone had stabbed me in the back and then twisted the knife. I kept reading because I needed to understand how deep this really went. The worst part. She was bragging about how she was getting away with it, how Jake was better in bed, and how she loved the thrill of cheating. That's when I realized. This wasn't just a fling, she was actively lying, sneaking, betraying everything we built. My heart sank. I'd been giving her the benefit of the doubt, and now I saw the truth laid bare. I confronted her the next morning. I showed her the messages, the receipts, everything I'd uncovered. She looked at me with that icy, bitchy smirk she's perfected over the years. Her first excuse: "You're overreacting, it's just sex, it doesn't mean anything. You're paranoid as usual." She denied everything at first, acting like I was crazy for even suspecting her. But I had proof, screenshots, bank statements, her own words. Still, she kept lying, saying I was imagining things, that I was jealous, insecure, that she loved me and wouldn't cheat. That's her favorite line: "I love you, but I just needed some excitement." As if that made it okay. The emotional roller coaster hit hard. I felt crushed, furious, then numb. I was angry at her for lying, but more than that, I was furious at myself for not seeing it sooner. How could I have missed the signs? How could I have been so blind? I kept replaying the moments she'd dismissed my concerns, the times she'd snapped at me for trusting too much. And now, I was left with a shattered trust and a wife who was more interested in her affair than our marriage. I felt betrayed, not just by her, but by everything I thought I knew about us. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The next step was clear in my mind. I had to find out exactly how deep her lies went, especially with the money. That's when I discovered she'd forged my signature to sell our house behind my back. I found out she'd already cashed out $500, $0 from the sale, and was draining the proceeds. Money we'd worked hard for, money I thought was our safety net. And she was lying about the bank accounts the entire time, hiding the truth and using the money to fund her affair. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about betrayal on a financial level that could ruin everything I'd built. I felt like I was in a nightmare. I couldn't believe she'd do something so calculated, so cold. The house was our family's legacy, and she'd just handed it over to a stranger for her own pleasure. That's when I knew I had to take control to figure out my next move. I was angry, yes, but also hurt and confused. How did we get here? How did someone I loved so much turn into someone capable of such lies? I was ready to fight for what was mine, for the truth, and for the life I thought I knew. After I found out about her affair and the forged sale of the house, everything changed. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck, but at the same time I knew I couldn't let her keep pulling the strings. The house was more than just a home. It was our security, our future. And she had just handed it over to some stranger for her own selfish needs. I spent days obsessively going through bank statements, emails, and her phone, trying to piece together how deep her deception went. That's when I uncovered the worst part. She had been lying about our bank accounts the entire time. I'd always trusted her with the finances, but now I realized she'd been hiding accounts. She opened new ones in her name, probably to stash the money from the sale, and she'd been draining those accounts for months. Every time I asked about our finances, she'd spin some story she was saving for the future or just managing things quietly. But it was all lies. She'd been secretly building her own stash, probably to run away or just because she thought she could outsmart me. The more I looked, the angrier I got. I found emails where she was planning her escape, talking about how she'd finally be free and how she was going to start a new life with Jake. That's when I realized she wasn't just cheating on me emotionally. She was planning her exit, using my own money and assets to do it. The betrayal cut deep. I had trusted her to be honest, to be a partner. Instead, I was discovering she'd been lying, stealing, and scheming behind my back for months. I remember sitting on the edge of our bed, staring at the pile of evidence I'd gathered. My hands were trembling. I felt betrayed, furious, and helpless all at once. How could she do this? How could she lie so blatantly, take my money and then act like I was the crazy one? I started thinking about all those nights she'd come home late, her phone always hidden, her attitude cold and distant. It wasn't just her cheating. I was starting to see a pattern of deception that went way beyond that. She was actively trying to wipe me out financially, to leave me with nothing. That's when I decided I had to act fast. I couldn't let her drain the last of the money or sell the house entirely. I contacted a lawyer, a private investigator, and even a financial advisor. I needed to get control of the situation before she did any more damage. I knew she'd try to cover her tracks, so I had to be smart. I subpoenaed bank records, got access to the accounts she'd hidden, and made sure I had proof of everything. I also started looking into the sale of the house, how she forged my signature, who she sold it to, and whether any of the proceeds had already been spent. Meanwhile, I was battling an intense mix of feelings. Part of me wanted to explode, to confront her and scream at her for everything she'd done, but I knew that wouldn't get me anywhere. I needed to stay calm, gather facts, and plan my next move. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about protecting what was left of my life, my money, and my sanity. Honestly, I felt like I was fighting ghosts. She was so good at covering her tracks, lying and manipulating, that I wasn't sure what was real anymore. Every time I thought I had a lead, she'd come up with another lie, another excuse. One of the most shocking things I found was her attempt to forge my signature on the sale documents. She'd even gone so far as to fake my handwriting, which was amateurish but convincing enough for a quick sale. She'd already transferred the money into an account she controlled, and I only found out because I'd hired a handwriting expert. The lawyer confirmed it was a forgery, and now I had legal grounds to challenge the sale. But the damage was done. I was left with a huge hole in my finances, and she was draining the accounts daily. I was furious, feeling betrayed on every level, but I was also determined to fight back. I was about to let her take everything I'd worked for without a fight. That's when I realized the scope of her betrayal. She lied about everything: our marriage, the house, the money, her entire life with me. I felt like a fool for trusting her so blindly, but I also knew I had to stay strong to outsmart her. I started making plans to get my money back, to stop her from disappearing with what was left. I wasn't just angry, I was pissed off that she thought she could get away with this. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial, legal, and deeply personal. I had to be smart, careful, and relentless if I wanted to get through this mess. After I got all the evidence, her forged signatures, the hidden bank accounts, the sale of the house, I knew I couldn't just sit around waiting for her to make her move. I had to act fast. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in family law and financial crimes. It was clear she'd been planning this for a while, and I needed to make sure I had legal backing to fight her. The lawyer told me I had a solid case for fraud, breach of trust, and the illegal sale of our property. I also hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her, just in case she tried to hide or destroy evidence, or worse, try to run off with the remaining money. Meanwhile, I discovered that she'd already drained most of the proceeds from the house sale. She transferred large sums into secret accounts, some in her name, some in fake ones she'd set up just to hide the money. She was spending it recklessly, luxury shopping, fancy dinners, even a few trips. It was obvious she had her eyes set on disappearing entirely. That's when I decided I needed to freeze her accounts. I worked with my lawyer to get a court order to block any further transactions. It was a tense process. She was fighting me every step of the way, denying everything, claiming I was overreacting and trying to control her. The most shocking part came when I found out she'd been lying about the entire financial situation. She had been pretending to be broke, acting like she had no money, but I uncovered multiple bank accounts she'd kept hidden, with hundreds of thousands of dollars in them. She'd been lying about her job, her income, everything. She'd even forged documents claiming she was unemployed to get more benefits. I couldn't believe how deep her lies went. She'd been living a double life, one where she was pretending to be the innocent wife, and another where she was secretly planning her escape, draining our savings, and cheating on me with Jake. The hardest part was realizing how much I'd trusted her. I'd always been the one working hard, providing for us, making sure we were secure. And she'd been secretly working behind my back, plotting her own future without me. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, her secretive phone habits, her late nights, the way she'd dismiss my concerns as paranoia. I felt so stupid for not seeing the truth sooner. But at the same time, I was furious. Furious that she'd betrayed me, that she'd stolen from me, and that she'd lied so convincingly. I also found out she'd been manipulating our social circle, telling friends and family that I was just overreacting or that I was paranoid. She painted herself as the victim, the wronged wife, while behind the scenes she was orchestrating her own escape plan. That realization made me even more determined to fight back. I couldn't let her get away with this. I finally understood that her entire persona was a facade, bitchy, manipulative, and willing to do anything to get what she wanted. So I made a decision. I was going to take her to court for the house, the money she stole, and the lies she told. I wanted her held accountable, not just for the financial damage, but for the emotional toll she'd inflicted on me. I also wanted to protect what was left of my reputation and my sanity. I knew the process wouldn't be easy. She'd fight to the bitter end, probably lie even more and try to spin everything in her favor. But I was prepared. I had the evidence, the legal backing, and the support of a good team. I wasn't going to let her ruin me without a fight. At this point, I was starting to realize just how much I'd been blinded by love and trust. I'd always thought she was the girl I married, the girl I'd built a life with. Turns out she was a master manipulator who played me for years. The betrayal cut so deep I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. But I also knew I had to move forward, to reclaim what was mine, and to rebuild my life from the ashes of her lies. I couldn't change what she'd done, but I could control how I responded. And I was determined to do everything in my power to make sure she paid for her actions, not just legally, but emotionally too. The court proceedings moved faster than I expected, probably because I had a mountain of evidence: her forged signatures, the hidden accounts, the sale of the house, and her reckless spending. It was relentless. She tried to deny everything, of course, putting on that icy, bitchy face she's perfected, claiming I was trying to ruin her, that I was paranoid, jealous, and controlling. But the evidence was overwhelming. Her lies unraveled quickly once the court ordered access to her hidden accounts, and her excuses sounded hollow. What hit me hardest was seeing her in court, trying to manipulate the situation, acting like the victim. She'd spin stories about how she was just trying to find herself, how she needed space, and how I was too controlling. It was classic Emily, blame everyone but herself. She even had the audacity to cry, pretending to be the wronged wife, while her eyes were cold and calculating behind her tears. I couldn't look at her without feeling a mix of anger and disgust. Meanwhile, I was fighting to get the house back. The court ordered her to return the title, and I was awarded a restraining order to prevent her from draining any more funds or trying to sell the property again. It was a relief, but I knew this was only the beginning. She was still trying to fight the case, filing appeals and dragging her feet, claiming she was the victim of my paranoia. But the judge saw right through her. The evidence was too damning. Her lies, her manipulation, her outright theft, they all painted a clear picture. The most shocking revelation came when I learned she'd already spent most of the money she stole from the sale of our house. She used it to fund her affair with Jake, buy designer clothes, and pay for trips abroad. She'd been living the high life on my dime, all while pretending to be the innocent wife. That realization made me feel sick. She'd been cheating, lying, stealing all at the same time. I'd been blind to it for so long, and now I could see her true colors in full detail. Throughout all this, I also had to deal with the emotional toll. I felt betrayed on every level, by her, by myself, even by the idea that I'd been so naive. I'd built a life with her, trusted her completely, and she'd turned out to be someone I barely recognized. There were nights I'd lie awake, replaying everything, questioning what I did wrong, wondering if I could have caught her sooner. But deep down, I knew she was just good at hiding her true nature. She was manipulative, selfish, and cold, and I'd never seen it coming. The aftermath was a whirlwind of legal battles, financial chaos, and emotional exhaustion. I was left with a huge mess: our house in limbo, a drained bank account, and a wife who refused to accept defeat. I kept telling myself I'd get through it, that I'd rebuild, but some days felt impossible. I'd lost my trust, my sense of security, and quite frankly, my hope that I'd ever feel safe. Again, the betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I wondered if I'd ever forgive her, if I even wanted to. But I knew I had to keep fighting. I filed for divorce, and seeing her face across the courtroom during the proceedings was a stark reminder of how far I'd fallen. She still had that bitchy smirk, that dismissive attitude, acting like everything was a game. I realized then that she was never going to change. She was a liar, a manipulator, and a thief, and I was just a pawn in her twisted plan. Still, I was determined to take back control of my life, to reclaim what she tried to steal from me, and to move on. I've learned a lot through this nightmare. Trust is fragile. Money can be a weapon, and some people will do anything to get what they want, even if it means destroying everything in their path. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I'll never let anyone manipulate me like that again. I'll rebuild step by step, and I'll make sure her lies don't define me. I just wish I'd seen her for who she really was sooner. Maybe. Then I wouldn't have been blindsided by the cold, calculated betrayal that nearly tore my life apart. The divorce was finalized a few months later, but the aftermath still lingers. I thought once she signed those papers, everything would start to feel a little less heavy. I'd get some space to breathe, to heal. But honestly, it's been the hardest thing I've ever gone through. Even after she's gone, I keep finding little things that remind me of how deeply she lied and betrayed me. The house is empty now. The walls echo with silence, and every corner seems to whisper about her treachery. One of the most frustrating parts was trying to piece together what she'd really done with the money. I hired a forensic accountant, and what they uncovered was staggering. She had already spent almost all of the $500, $0 from the house sale, on herself, on trips, on designer clothes, on Jake. I found out she'd been funneling a good chunk into offshore accounts, hiding even more money that I hadn't known existed. She'd been planning her escape for months, maybe even longer. That revelation hit me like a punch in the stomach. She'd been lying and stealing from me while pretending to be the perfect wife. The legal battles dragged on, and I realized how much energy and patience it takes to fight someone who's willing to lie, cheat, and manipulate her way out of accountability. She kept trying to claim I was crazy, that I was the one at fault for questioning her. She painted herself as the victim, even as court documents proved she'd forged my signature and sold our home behind my back. It was infuriating to watch her spin stories, to see her act like she was the wronged party. But I had the evidence, and in the end, that's what mattered. The court awarded me the house back, but it's not the same anymore. The emotional damage is hard to shake. I walk through the empty rooms and wonder how I missed all the signs. Her secretive phone calls, her late nights, the way she dismissed my concerns as paranoia. I keep asking myself if I could have done something different, if I should have seen the warning signs earlier. But honestly, I think she was just that good at hiding her true self. That bitchy, manipulative side she kept locked away. Until she thought she could get away with it all. I also learned a harsh lesson about trust, how fragile it really is. She lied so convincingly, played the victim so well that I almost believed her. Almost. But now I know better. I know that some people are just good at deception and you have to be extra cautious. I've become more guarded, more suspicious of the people I let into my life. Not everyone is as honest as they seem. The financial mess she left behind is another story. I had to clean up her mess, close her hidden accounts, and set up new ones in my name. I also had to rebuild my credit score, which took a hit from her reckless spending and the court battles. It's a long road, but I'm slowly getting back on track. I started seeing a therapist too, because dealing with the emotional fallout has been draining. Sometimes I wake up feeling angry, other times just numb. The betrayal runs deep, and I don't think I'll ever fully forget what she did. But here's the thing, I refuse to let her ruin me. I want to rebuild my life piece by piece. I've started focusing on myself, my career, my health, my future. I've realized I'm stronger than I thought even after everything. And honestly, I want to warn others, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the signs, no matter how small. Because if I'd caught her lies earlier, maybe I could have saved myself from this nightmare, or at least minimized the damage. Now I'm just trying to move forward. I've cut ties with her completely, blocked her from my life. I want nothing to do with her anymore. She's a manipulative, selfish woman who thought she could get away with everything. But I learned that justice catches up with people like her, and I will do everything I can to ensure she pays for her lies, her theft, and her betrayal, because I deserve that much. And deep down, I know I'll come out of this stronger, wiser, and more cautious than ever before. Looking back now, I realize how much this entire nightmare changed me. I used to believe in the idea of a perfect marriage, that honesty and trust were the foundation of everything. Turns out, I was naive. Emily showed me that some people are just masters at deception, willing to do anything to get what they want, even if it destroys everything they once claimed to cherish. The betrayal was so deep that I honestly questioned if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. But over time, I've come to see it as a harsh lesson, one I wouldn't have learned any other way. The biggest thing I've taken away is the importance of paying attention to the little signs. I ignored so many red flags, her secretive phone habits, her dismissiveness, the late nights, and now I see how dangerous it is to dismiss your instincts. If I trusted myself more, maybe I could have caught her lies earlier. But even with all that, I also learned that people can hide their true selves very well, and sometimes you only see the truth when it's staring you in the face after everything falls apart. Financially, this mess has been a brutal wake-up call. I never thought I'd be in a situation where I'd have to fight to reclaim what's mine, but here I am. I've had to rebuild my credit, secure my assets, and learn a lot about legal protections that I never thought I'd need. It's a long road. And honestly, some days I feel exhausted just thinking about how much work it's going to take to recover. But I also know that I'm stronger now. I've learned to be cautious, to double-check everything, and to never blindly trust someone just because they say they love you. Emotionally, I've had my ups and downs. There are days when I feel furious that she could do this to me, to our life together. Other days I feel numb, like I'm just going through the motions. It's taken a toll, no doubt about it. But I've also found some peace in finally putting an end to her lies. I've cut her out of my life completely. No more calls, no more texts, no more trying to explain things that are unexplainable. I've realized that I deserve better than someone who manipulates, cheats, and steals from me. I deserve honesty, respect, and trust, things she never really gave me. Now, I focus on rebuilding myself. I go to therapy, work on my career, and spend more time with the people who genuinely care about me. I've learned that healing isn't linear, and some wounds take longer to close than others. But I'm committed to moving forward. I want to be cautious but not cynical. I want to trust again but wisely. And I want to remind anyone reading this, if you ever suspect something's wrong, don't ignore it. Trust your gut. Get help. Fight for what's yours because no one else will do it for you. In the end, I'm grateful I found the strength to face the truth. It's been a brutal lesson, but I've come out of it more aware, more resilient, and more determined to protect myself from people like her. I hope my story serves as a warning to others. Never take your trust for granted, and always be ready to stand up for yourself when it's time. Because if I've learned anything, it's that betrayal can come from the people you least expect, and the only way to survive it is to be prepared, to be strong, and to never lose sight of your worth.